Chapter 3. Sacred Grains and Ancient Covenants. 1. The Ritual of Sacrifice, Levitical and Pagan Laws. The first temples rose from the dust. Fire burned on stone altars, incense curled into the sky, and the gods, for the first time, were watching what humans put on the table. Salt had outgrown the kitchen. It was no longer just a tool for preserving meat. It had become something far more powerful, a bridge between the living and the divine. Think about what the ancient mind saw when it looked at salt. Here was a substance that stopped rot, that froze decay in its tracks. In a world where everything withered, everything spoiled, salt alone seemed to last forever. And if something lasted forever, it must belong to the gods. The demand was clear in the laws of the ancient Hebrews. In the scrolls of Leviticus, the command is written with absolute authority. Every offering brought before God must be seasoned with salt. No exceptions. Season every grain offering with salt. Never omit the salt of your covenant with God. This was not a recipe, it was a rule of the heavens. A sacrifice without salt was a sacrifice already touched by death, already tainted, already unworthy. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks and Romans felt the same pull. To the Romans, salt was sacred enough to have its own ritual. Before an animal was slain on the altar, the Vestal virgins would prepare a mixture, toasted grain ground fine and mixed with coarse salt. They called it mola salsa. This mixture was sprinkled over the head of the offering, a blessing, a consecration. The act itself, the sprinkling, gave us a word we still use today: immolate, to consecrate through offering. The Romans believed the sharp sting of the salt woke something up. It sharpened the essence of the sacrifice, made it vivid, made it real, so that when the flame consumed the animal, the gods would receive something pure. Even the philosophers saw something sacred in the grain. Pythagoras, the great Greek thinker, called salt the emblem of justice, because just as salt preserves whatever it touches, justice preserves the order of the world. Salt was not just food. It was not just medicine. It had become the anti-chaos mineral, the one substance in a world of decay that refused to crumble. And by placing it on the altar, the ancient world was not just honoring the gods, they were trying to salt their own destiny. 2. Symbols of incorruptibility, salt in ancient theology. In the ancient world, everything died. Fruit rotted on the vine, flesh turned to poison within days. Even stone given enough time would crumble. But salt refused. It did not mold, it did not wither. Dissolve it in water and wait. The water evaporates, and there it is again. Perfect, unchanged, exactly as it was before. In the eyes of the ancient theologian, this was not chemistry, this was a miracle. Homer, the legendary Greek storyteller, called salt divine, not because of how it tasted, but because of what it represented. A substance born from the two purest forces in nature, the sun's fire, the ocean's water, and from their meeting, a crystal of absolute purity. The philosopher Plutarch went further. He argued that salt was a kind of soul injected into dead flesh, a spirit that fought back against the natural decay of matter. By salting their food, the Greeks believed they were performing a quiet daily act of resistance against the universe itself. In the world of mystics and philosophers, this idea grew deeper still. They spoke of the salt of wisdom, a concept that drew a direct line between the mineral and the mind. In Latin, the word for taste and the word for wisdom share the same root, sapere, to taste, sapiente, wisdom. To be salty was to be sharp, to be alive, to be spiritually unbreakable. The Romans carried this belief into the most intimate moments of life. When a child was born, a single grain of salt was placed on its lips, a ritual of purification, a blessing. The Romans believed it would ward off evil and set the child on a path of integrity. And when two people made an oath, salt was placed between them, a covenant of salt, an agreement sealed not with ink or gold, but with a mineral that could never be destroyed. Because salt was eternal, the oath was eternal too. As we look back at all of these beliefs, one thing becomes clear. Salt was the first attempt by humanity to define the unchanging. In a world built on decay, salt was the promise that some things could last forever. Truth, honor, the bond between a God and a people, all of it salted against time. 3. The Pythagorean emblem of justice. Picture a quiet academy on the coast of ancient Greece. The Aegean Sea stretches out before it, blue and endless. The air smells of salt and sun-warmed stone. Inside the halls, a group of thinkers sit in silence, listening, observing, searching for the hidden order beneath the surface of the world. This is the school of Pythagoras, and at the center of their communal life, on every table, at every meal, sat a single object they regarded with the deepest reverence: a bowl of salt. To the Pythagoreans, the world was not made of random things. It was a symphony, a mathematical harmony, and every substance in nature carried a moral weight. Salt carried the heaviest of all. The logic was elegant. Watch what salt does to meat. It halts the rot. It preserves the structure. It keeps the flesh from sliding into chaos. Now ask yourself, what does the same thing for a society? Justice. Justice preserves order. It prevents a community from collapsing into greed and lawlessness. It holds the shape of things long after the pressures of the world try to dissolve them. Salt and justice, one and the same. This belief shaped the daily rituals of the Brotherhood in remarkable ways. To sit at a Pythagorean table was to enter a sacred agreement, and salt was the guardian of that agreement. There was a strict rule among them: never betray the salt, never waste it, never dishonor the bond it represented. Because salt, to them, was indestructible. Dissolve it in water, and it seems to vanish, but wait for the water to dry, and there it is again, whole, perfect, unchanged. To eat salt with someone was to forge a friendship as permanent as the mineral itself. Pythagoras also believed salt sharpened the mind. In his diet of grains, honey, and vegetables, no meat, no blood, salt was the one ingredient that brought fire to the senses. It woke the intellect. It cleared the fog. It was, he believed, the salt of the mind. The Pythagoreans turned the simplest thing on the table into a courtroom for the soul. They taught that the most ordinary substances often hold the deepest truths, and salt, that white, quiet crystal, was the sharpest truth of all. 4. Eastern deities, Philo and the worship of Brine. Far from the temples of Rome and the academies of Greece, in the misty, ancient valleys of what is now Sichuan in the heart of China, salt was not just sacred, it was alive. Here, deep beneath the limestone, the earth held vast rivers of brine, dark, mineral-rich water that had been locked underground for millennia, and the people who lived above it believed with absolute conviction that a god lived down there too. His name was Philo, the celestial guardian of the salt, the one who had unlocked the secrets hidden in the dragon's blood, as the ancient Chinese called brine. Picture the scene at one of these early salt wells. The air is thick, heavy with humidity and the sulfurous breath of the deep earth. Bamboo poles strike the limestone in a steady, hollow rhythm, thud, 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 boring deeper and deeper into the ground. And then the brine rises, dark, concentrated, hauled up from the darkness in hollowed-out tree trunks, carried to the edge of great, bubbling cauldrons where fire waits. But before a single drop hits the flame, everything stops. The chief of the well kneels before a small altar, painted deep red, decorated with offerings of fruit and incense, and he prays to Philo. Because without the god's blessing, the brine might turn weak, the salt might lose its power, or worse, the bamboo casings might crack under the weight of the mountain itself. The ritual is beautiful. Thick ropes of sandalwood smoke curl upward into the damp air. The workers believe this smoke is the only thing that can carry their prayers down into the earth to where Philo waits. In the boiling houses, the steam rises in great swirling clouds. The cauldrons bubble and hiss, and slowly from the chaos of the liquid, white crystals begin to form, perfect geometry emerging from the dark water. To the ancient Chinese, this was not just a chemical process, it was the divine at work. Salt was one of the 7 necessities of life, but it was the only one that had its own God, the only one that demanded not just labor, but prayer. Every grain of salt that left those wells carried something invisible with it, a fragment of the earth's spirit, a reminder that civilization itself was built on faith and on the bitter, beautiful darkness underground.
5. The Covenant of Salt, Enduring Oaths in History. In the ancient Near East, where the sun scorches the land and trust is the only currency that matters, there was a bond stronger than blood, stronger than stone. It was called the Covenant of Salt, and to understand it, you must first understand what salt meant to these people. In a desert, everything fades, water disappears, alliances crumble, even the mightiest empires turn to dust, but salt endures. Picture a night in the wilderness. 2 tribal leaders sit across from one another. They have been enemies, perhaps for generations. Between them, on a rough woven mat, sits a small clay bowl filled with coarse white crystals. No words are spoken. Each man reaches forward, takes a pinch of salt, places it on his tongue. And in that moment, everything changes. They have eaten together. They have shared the mineral that the earth itself cannot destroy. The salt is now inside them, in their blood, in their cells, in the very chemistry of their bodies. To break this oath was not just a betrayal of a man, it was a betrayal of nature itself. In the courts of Persian kings, to be called a salt eater was the highest honor. It meant your loyalty was not bought with gold or fear. It was sealed with something older, something deeper. Even a desert raider, the fiercest, most ruthless, would lower his blade if he had tasted the salt of his host. The white crystals turned a stranger into a brother for as long as the salt remained in the body. It was an invisible sanctuary, a shield made of mineral and faith. This idea did not disappear with the ancient world. It traveled, it survived, it embedded itself in the language we still speak today. When we call someone the salt of the earth, we mean they are trustworthy, solid, unchanging. When we say someone is worth their salt, we are echoing an oath made in a desert tent thousands of years ago. The covenant of salt was a whisper passed down through the ages, a quiet promise that in a world of shifting sands and broken promises, some bonds were never meant to dissolve. Like salt itself, they were made to last.